Hello, everyone. This is Bentley out in Kent, Washington, and we've got a couple things to go over, including a new tank that I teased in the last video. So first, I wanted to showcase a couple of plants before I go to the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society's general auction and my haul from it. So first off, this is Bacopa Yellow Flame. And you can see in the tops here, this is when it's at full size, really healthy. You get this really kind of cool, dusky, orangish red color, and the natural color up top is more of a yellowish, not quite as bright green as normal Bacopa caroliniana. And we're going to kind of pan the camera. You can see a little bit at the very bottom there in the Kochu tetras, but we'll pan down and above some hygrophila, you'll be able to see the very bottom leaves of the Bacopa. And you can see it's much more bright green down there. And then the higher you come up, it starts to get that yellow and then slowly turns to that kind of orangey red tone, which is super pretty. Now, the other plant that I wanted to highlight, just as a kind of neat plant to check out if you get an opportunity, is a Ludwigia inclinata species called Crystal. Now, this is kind of rare. Going to be a little hard to find unless you know some like really big plant geeks or you happen to find it online from a private seller. Has these long, thin leaves and kind of a yellowy tone, shows its veining really well. But the higher you get, you start seeing more orange and red tones. And you can see here from the side, the newest leaves have a very crinkly pattern in their growth that looks a lot like Crypt Wendetii, where the long adult leaves are much more straight. Um, and as you can see, as I pull this over, you can see much more of that like orange and red tone the higher up on that plant, and that like really obvious vein striping, like most of the variegated plants. It's really neat, really cool plant. Um, it grows like a weed if you give it CO2. So if you get one stem and you're pretty good with plants, that's all you need. You will have plenty. I think from my one stem after a few weeks, I have about 5 now. So let's go into the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society, or GSAS, auction hall. Right off the kick, we have some Bucephalandra Brownie brown, and you can see it's flowering, which is super sweet. Now the brownies, you're gonna see one more in a second. You'll notice this isn't brown; it's pretty dark green. This plant, all the brownie species, so Ghost, Phantom, all those, to get them to those colors, you have to put them in extremely low light. This is some brownie blue, and you can see this is actually a really big piece. A little bit of blackbeard algae on it, but that'll get cleaned up by the Florida flagfish that are in here, so I'm not really terribly worried. And there's CO2 that kind of limits its growth. But anyways, this species requires either super low light, where you would think it's going to die, it has no light, or really crazy high light that is color spectrum tuned to force the colors to come out. So to see the reds, the purples, that stuff. You kind of do, gotta do some work. Sorry about my finger there. Here's a couple more we got. So here's some Ludwigia pantanal right up front. I'm gonna zoom in on this. It's a great fine leaf plant. It stays kind of green down low, and the higher you get, it gets these bright, bright orange and reds. It's a really pretty plant. Then behind that is some Rotella willickii green. Now this plant normally is kind of an orangey red tone, right? It's one of those red plants that's out there, super fine leaf, has a kind of a feather duster almost look. But if you look hard enough, you can find the green variant, which is pretty rare, but very, very cool because it has a more kind of yellowy green tone. As we zoom out here, you can see the size. Look at the the Ranalisma there in the middle of some of the new plants. There's full-size stems and some smaller stems, and you can see how big that piece of Buce is, and those stems are pretty sweet. Now, if you've watched my Instagram, you'll have seen this label before, a few days ago. This is the tank I've spoiled. So this is a 140-gallon acrylic tank. And with the exception of that cholla wood covered in Java fern there, every plant in this tank came from the GSAS auction. I basically went there, I was selling a bunch of plants and some fish, and I went there with the intent to get all of the plants and then try some new stuff that I was going to plant into this tank. Now, this tank will have CO2, only a light amount, just going to push enough to boost some growth. But first, I want to talk about this really sweet carpeting plant. Now, this is on the IUCN Red List. That means it's an endangered species plant, so it's very hard to come by. It's kind of between microsword and pygmy chainsword in size. Nice fine pattern. This is called the Ranalisma rostrata. It comes from a part of China, if I remember right, in doing my research. Very, very cool. Back here we have some Val tortifolia, aka corkscrew Val. You can see some of it's already doing. It's lots of young plants, but it'll look really sweet in a little while. Then we got some crypts in here. The very first one up front is Pygmea. Between it and the red is a couple of Sri Lanka, and then the very back in the red is some Blasii. Then there's this cool stem here called Clinopodium Brownei. If you actually look at the physical stems, they're square, which is pretty weird. And then they've got some Stargine repens in here, and then this really cool lily called Santarum. This, unlike most lilies, spreads by runners. Now, most lilies, you either have a bulb and you get more from that, or you do some flower stuff. This is a kind of unique lily. You'll see some more as it gets happier. We've got a Franz Stoffel sword in back. I've had one of these before, but with CO2 you see much more red. And then some Crypt Wendenii Mioia in the back there to give me another like nice red plant in the background. And then we've got these really bushy Java Fern Wendelov on this Choya wood. My other Java Fern Wendelov that's on wood had thrown a bunch of baby plants. I kept some, I sold some. And my roommate and I got this crazy idea, like, let's poke it into the holes in the Choya wood and just see what happens. And this is what happens. We lost some of it, of course. Some of it just struggled and didn't really take hold, or didn't get good enough light, or was too small. And the rest of it has grown bushy and wonderful. And then in back you can see there's also this Cyperus helferi is the last kind of plant I picked up. It's a nice grassy plant, gets nice and tall. It just gives some good height, kind of there to sort of cover my overflow a little. You see this, my roommate's arm there in the side. So in a week, 200 guppies are coming into this thing. I've already got them set. They're pretty neat. Tell me, what do you think? I've picked up 200 guppies. What kind? What do you think they are? Tell me in the comments. And look forward in a week, and we'll show you this thing really going nuts. As always, thank you for watching. If you're ever in the Seattle area, check out GSAS. Have a good one.